Scarsdale's Psycho, written by Nova Jones, narrated by Nova Jones. Content warning. This story contains depictions of violence, gore, animal death, human death, psychological horror, and themes involving mental illness. Viewer discretion is advised. There is a village in New York. It's known as Scarsdale, though its original name has been lost to time. These days, it's a ghost town, where only the bravest or the poorest seek shelter in its ancient homes. And even they didn't dare go into the cursed house where it all began. It used to be a beautiful neighborhood, full of children's laughter as they played in the streets, of the casual greetings and conversations of old friends. How did it end? Well, dear reader, it all started with a young couple by the names of Kathy and Richard Monroe. Kathy and Richard lived in a small house in the middle of town. They were well known in the community and were loved by all. Being born and raised in the town, they knew everybody by name and greeted everyone with a smile. The couple had a young daughter by the name of Olivia. Now, Olivia was a strange child. At the age of 8, she was well known in the village as an oddity. As much as her parents tried to hide her behavior, people noticed how she would stare blankly from her window at the other children as they played in the streets before jerking away suddenly, as if not of her own volition. How, when she was finally enrolled in school at the age of 6, she just sat silently in the corner, never speaking to anyone. Parents told their children, "Don't worry about the Monroe girl, she's just shy, she'll grow out of it." But the girl remained closed off, any attempts to talk to her or get her to respond failing. Shortly after she was enrolled in school, she started taking small strolls up and down her street, walking almost robotically back and forth from her house, around the schoolhouse, and for exactly 30 minutes before returning home. On these walks, she'd pull behind her a small red wagon. The wagon had belonged to a neighbor boy before he'd thrown it away thanks to the front left wheel, which squealed loudly with every motion. It was quiet enough that none of the townspeople complained, so her parents let it be. When she was 7, a small black kitten started accompanying her on these walks, riding along inside the wagon. When asked, her parents stated, "Oh, the cat? Yes, that's Opal. She's the purebred we bought so that Olivia wouldn't be lonely. Isn't she lovely?" To which any curious neighbor would coo over the small animal before taking their leave. Months later, the girl left her house, Opal riding along behind her as normal, but returned alone 10 minutes later, the wagon empty. When questioned, she shrugged, face blank as always. Opal was soon forgotten. The school staff, concerned for the child, called a meeting with the parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Monroe," the principal began, "we have noticed your daughter is withdrawn in class. The teachers report that they have never heard her utter a word, and she ignores them when they tell her to leave that wagon of hers outside the school." Mrs. Monroe smiled softly. "Oh, yes, we've noticed the same behavior. It's quite normal for our dear Olivia. She never likes speaking in general, and treasures that little cart." The principal cleared his throat. "Well, the counselor has suggested you get her looked at by a mental health specialist. While I know it's not traditional—" "Oh, please," Mr. Monroe interrupted, laughing quietly to himself. "We both know all that neuro-wish-wash is just propaganda meant to take our money. Olivia will be fine. She just needs time. She is only 8 years old, after all." And with that, the couple smiled and left, leaving the principal stumped on the matter. And so, life continued on in the small town. Olivia continued to return to school, never participating in any assignments, discussing the material, or even moving from her spot in the corner. Her teachers were baffled as to what to do with her. How was she supposed to learn the material if she would not participate? The only time she was ever seen besides school was on those walks of hers. A kindly elderly woman named Lucy Shirk, but was known by all as Grandma L, had a small chihuahua called Sunny. He was a menace, barking at all hours of the day at anyone who passed by, but was the sweetest dog you'd ever meet if you managed to get close enough to pet him. But one day Mr. Moore, the neighbor across the street from Grandma Elle, strolled past her house on the way to work. It was quieter than normal. The only sound was the slight whining of metal in the distance. Not even the robins singing their songs in the trees. He didn't notice at first, his face buried in the morning paper, but his steps slowed to a stop in front of her driveway, knowing something was off but not quite putting his finger on it. Making up his mind, he walked up the drive and knocked softly at her front door. As he waited for her to answer, it finally hit him. The door opened and he greeted the elderly woman before questioning. "Grandma Elle, I hate to be a bother, but I was on my way to work and I couldn't help but notice Sonny was nowhere to be seen or heard. Is everything all right?" Grandma Elle's face fell. "Oh dear, thank you for your concern. I've looked everywhere, but I haven't been able to find my precious Sonny anywhere. I was actually making plans to call my son and ask him to come search the neighborhood, since these old bones won't allow me to anymore." "Good Lord, really?" Mr. Moore gasped. "Well, I have work this morning, so unfortunately I can't give any assistance, but I'm sure my wife would love to help you." The woman's expression lifted slightly. She asked, "Really?" And at his nod smiled. "Well, I'll make sure to call her right up. Thank you, dearie." With that, Mr. Moore took his leave, shoving all thoughts of the poor animals to the back of his mind to deal with later. 2 days later, the search ended with no luck. Grandma Elle ended it herself, stating, "Well, he was an old pup. It was bound to happen soon," and, tear-faced, stumbled back inside her lonely house. So life continued as normal, the people eventually forgetting about poor Sonny after accepting her disappearance was just nature taking its course. Then Jacob disappeared. Jacob was the prized golden-headed lion tamarin owned by Jonathan Campbell, the village president. President Campbell adored the tamarin, treating it like his own child, much to the ire of his actual children. The monkey often accompanied him everywhere he went, including village events, and was well known among the entire community. So, when President Campbell called an emergency meeting in the square in a panic, announcing that Jacob had vanished into thin air, the entire town started to search for the lost primate. Unlike with the other 2 disappearances, the search didn't stop after a short time. They continued looking for an entire week, everyone perplexed when he was nowhere to be found. The search radius slowly widened as they continued, scouring every inch of the neighborhood and eventually beginning even looking inside the houses, thinking maybe Jacob had wandered into the house of another resident. Mr. Moore, who had taken the past week off work to assist, slowly trotted up the drive of Grandma Elle, thinking maybe in her old age she had mistaken the pampered monkey for a stray animal of some sort and taken him as a replacement for her dear Sonny. He approached the front door once again, softly knocking, and waited. And waited. And waited. He frowned. Grandma Elle always heard when someone was at the door and hurried to answer. Maybe her hearing was finally going? He knocked again, louder this time. "Grandma Elle, are you there?" He stood on the front porch for another 2 minutes, getting more concerned as time passed, with still no response. "Something the matter, Mr. Moore?" Mr. Moore jumped in surprise, turning around to find Officer Chiolik standing behind him. Officer Chiolik lived just down the road with her husband and had somehow managed to get her commanding officer to assign her to the case. "Oh, you scared me, officer," Mr. Moore panted, his hand going to his heart. Chiolik grinned sheepishly. "My apologies, Tim. I didn't mean to startle you. I just couldn't help but notice you seemed a little distraught." "Yes, well," Mr. Moore stood straighter slightly. "I've been knocking on Grandma Elle's door for a good 5 minutes, and she still hasn't answered. I'm concerned something may have happened." The officer grimaced. "Do you happen to have permission from her to come inside? Or a key of some sort that she gave you?" "No, I don't," the man said, scrunching his brow in concentration before snapping his fingers. But my wife does. She helps Grandma Elle clean her house sometimes on the weekends and has a key to do so." The two hurried across the street to the Moore household, and after a short explanation, Mrs. Moore crossed the street to the front door, key in hand. "Grandma Elle," Officer Chiolik yelled out, entering the house slowly. "Is anyone here?" Silence. The two searched the house, but no matter how much they looked, neither Jacob nor Grandma J were anywhere to be found. They exited the house, glancing around as if hoping they would find her sitting outside, perfectly fine. Chiolik sighed. "I have to call this in. This just went from a missing pet to a missing persons. Help!" Chiolik's head whipped around towards the shrieking and found an absolute distraught Mrs. Monroe running towards her, waving a handkerchief over her head in distress. "Oh, officer, thank goodness you're here. I was just about to call the police." "What's the issue, ma'am?" "My daughter, Olivia. I can't find her anywhere. She left for her daily walk almost an hour ago and still hasn't returned." Chiolik, recalling the habit of the young girl from the neighborhood gossip, was instantly concerned. "Calm down, Mrs. Monroe," the officer soothed. "I was just about to call my supervisor to get more officers down here to help search for Grandma Elle. I'll make sure to let them know about your daughter. Can you give me a description of what she was wearing when she left?" And so, the search for the missing Tamarin transformed into a search for the two missing people. Officers from all around villages came to help, and still, after an hour, there was no sign of anyone missing. The Monroes were beside themselves with worry, with no one able to offer any comfort. "Mr. and Mrs. Monroe, is there anywhere you know of that your daughter could have gone? Any location she especially likes or feels safe in?" the chief of police asked, keeping his tone low and soothing. No, Mrs. Monroe sobbed, clinging to her husband's arm. The only place she ever goes besides home is school. Her walks always last exactly 30 minutes, and when we followed her once to see where she went, she only went down to the schoolhouse and back home." The chief grimaced, calling into his radio. "Chief to search and rescue. Expand the search radius to include the schoolhouse. Make sure to search thoroughly." The search radius was expanded, and officers swarmed the building, scouring every inch of it but finding nothing. Officer Chiolik sighed, beginning to walk back towards her car to head to the other side of the search grid, before something glimmered out of the corner of her eye. She tread slowly closer, trying to figure out what it was, and her eyes widened when she was finally close enough to see. Blood. A small, barely there splash of blood, droplets creating a small trail leading behind the building. "Officer Chiolik?" she whispered into her radio. "Go ahead, Chiolik." "I got something outside the schoolhouse. Little trickle of blood leading to back lot. Investigating now." "Copy." She crept slowly forward, gun drawn. As she got closer, a sound caught her attention. She strained her hearing, trying to figure out what it could be. She crept around the corner and froze at the scene before her, a horrified scream filling the air, her gun dropping from her hands as they flew to her mouth. Blood covered the ground before her. Clumps of fur and what looked like bone littered throughout. A small pile of fabric collars lay to the side, soaked in the red liquid. To the side, a small red wagon sat, what remained of Grandma Elle inside. And right in the middle of it all, sitting curled into a ball, staring at her hands blankly, was Olivia. The chewed-up arm of Grandma Elle held in her small hands, teeth buried in the flesh. Officers who had been out front sprinted over, drawing guns as they approached, not knowing what could have possibly made their fellow officer release such a sound. They arrived, jaws dropping and eyes widening as they took it all in. One ran away and threw up into the nearest bush, another letting out a sob. Officer Chiolik swallowed the bile crawling up her throat, shaking hands reaching into her pocket for her phone, her eyes not leaving the child once. "Chief," she choked when he finally picked up, "we need you down at the schoolhouse. We found the girl, and, what's left of Grandma J. Bring the crime scene investigator." She hung up, knowing she'd get written up for the disrespect later, but not caring for the time being. Shoving her phone in her pocket, she shakily took a step forward, empty hands out in front of her in what she hoped seemed to be a peaceful gesture to the child. Olivia's eyes hadn't left her face once since she arrived, and Chiolik would later swear she hadn't blinked once. Hey, sweetheart," she stuttered, trying to force her voice into a reassuring tone of some sort. "Why don't you drop the arm and come over here, all right? We can go down to the station and get you cleaned up, okay?" The amber-colored eyes seemed almost the same shade as the blood surrounding her. "It's probably just the lighting," Chiolik mentally reassured herself. Olivia stared, unmoving and silent for a second, before slowly opening her jaw and setting the limb to the side. She silently stood and strolled almost casually towards Chiolik, taking her outstretched hand. Chiolik tried and failed not to shudder at the squelch that was released at the contact, making a valiant attempt to ignore just why the motion sounded like that. They walked towards the police vehicle, and Chiolik opened the door with her unoccupied hand. Olivia climbed in, buckled herself in, and placed her hands in her blood-stained lap. She stared straight ahead at the headrest, not a single expression or emotion crossing her face. Chiolik shut the door and took a deep, shaky breath before walking to the driver's seat and driving to the station in a daze, leaving the other officers on scene to deal with the tragic sight. She arrived at the station, giving her statement of what happened, washing up, and heading home. That night consisted of nothing but nightmares of blood-red eyes and bloodied bones for her. The chief stood outside the door to the women's locker room where he had left the 8-year-old to take a shower, phone in hand. He knew who he had to call, but he wasn't sure exactly how to explain the situation. Finally, he groaned and dialed the number. "St. Vincent Hospital, this is Sarah. How can I help you?"
"Hello, this is Chief Pratt. I need you to send one of your psychiatric evaluators to our station. Preferably one of the ones that deal with adolescents. We have a situation I'd rather not explain over the phone."
There was silence on the other end for a moment before the receptionist responded.
"We'll send one of our adolescent psychiatrists to you right away."
"Okay, thank you, ma'am. Have a good day."
He quickly hung up and ran his hand down his face. An hour later, a young woman in a long white lab coat walked into the room.
"Dr. Chloe Hammond, head adolescent psychiatrist at St. Vincent's. How can I help you?"
she introduced, shaking his offered hand. The chief explains the situation, leading her deeper into the station.
"We have her sitting in here."
Pratt opens the door into a small interrogation room, empty except for a small metal table in the center bolted to the floor, a metal chair on either side. On the side farthest from the door sits the girl, staring blankly at them.
"Well, hello there,"
Dr. Hammond says, walking over and sitting in the chair across from her.
"My name is Chloe. What's yours?"
The chief coughs into his fist.
"Actually, ma'am, the parent said she's never spoken, but..."
"Olivia."
Chief Pratt pales, stuttering in surprise. Dr. Hammond grins kindly.
"It's very nice to meet you, Olivia. Do you know why you're here?"
Olivia tilts her head slightly, staying silent for a few seconds before replying.
"Because I killed Opal, Sonny, Jacob, and Grandma J."
Hammond's eyes widened in surprise and slight horror before she regained control of her emotions.
"Can you tell me why you did that, Olivia?"
she urged. The child hummed.
"Because the man told me to,"
she said simply, as if it was obvious. The chief made a choking sound behind the door, but Hammond stayed silent, eyes narrowing slightly.
What man, sweetheart? The man who comes to play with me, silly, Olivia giggled. He gave me my wagon and told me Mommy and Daddy wouldn't yell anymore if Opal went away where she couldn't hurt the couch. Then he said Sonny was making them angry with his barking. Then Jacob made Mommy's nose and throat hurt, and Grandma J was ruining the sales valve views. So I made them go away. Are Mommy and Daddy happy now?
The two adults were pale when she finished, not able to respond.
Well,
Dr. Hammond finally stuttered, pulling the children's coloring book and crayons she brought with her out of her bag.
Why don't I and Chief Pratt go ask them while you stay here and color this?
Olivia nodded, taking the book and crayons as the adults hurried out of the room. They shut the door behind them and stood in the hallway for a second before Dr. Hammond took a deep breath and spoke.
I'm recommending she be signed into the St. Vincent's mental ward so we can monitor her behavior.
Chief Pratt nodded. I'll inform the parents. And so Olivia Monroe was taken to St. Vincent's Hospital Psychiatric Ward, where she lived for the next year before being released back into her parents' custody. From there, the family seemingly disappeared from the face of the earth. A week after her release, however, people started disappearing from the town. No matter how much the villagers looked, the victims were nowhere to be found. The doctors tasked with her care insisted that they weren't at fault for her behavior. They'd treated her to the best of their ability, but because of her parents' ignorance and failure to get her help sooner, it was too late for it to be effective. And so, dear reader, the town was almost completely abandoned, only the old and the brave remaining. They say that if you go to visit, you can sometimes still hear the quiet creaking and squeaking of young Olivia's wagon rolling up and down the street. Her story is a warning to all that without proper care, attention, and treatment, mental health can spiral out of control quickly and quietly, nobody noticing until it's too late. Disclaimer: this is a work of gothic horror fiction and is made purely for entertainment purposes. It is not meant to be an accurate depiction of mental illness or the experience of people with mental health conditions. The town's name, Scarsdale, was inspired by the real-life town of the same name, but the story, setting, and events are entirely fictional and are not intended to depict the real-life town in any way. This was originally a school assignment, and several characters' names were inspired by the names of my teachers. These characters are entirely fictional and are not meant to represent or resemble the real people they were named after. Thank you so much for listening.